Hello everybody, this is Unit 5, Formative 1, Day 4, Factoring when missing a term. So we've been working with functions that are set up like this. So we have ax squared plus bx plus c. So for when we have a missing term, what we've been working with is something like 3x squared minus 4x plus 27. So now when we're missing a term, we're going to be missing this bx term. We're going to be missing this term in the middle. So this 4x won't be here. We won't have an x term. We'll have an x squared term and a whole number at the end. So let's do a couple examples. Okay, here's our first problem. So number 1, we have negative 3x squared plus 27. So the first thing we want to do is find our GCF. Our GCF, remember, is our greatest common factor. So the biggest thing that goes into both of these terms. So I'm going to look at these two numbers. So I have a negative 3 and a 27. Our smaller number is 3. So I'm going to write out my factors of 3. I have 1 and 3. So I'm going to start with my biggest number, 3. 3 goes into negative 3, and then 3 goes into 27 as well. So our GCF is 3, and then I'm going to divide by a negative 3. Remember, we divide by a negative if there's a leading negative out here. So since I have this negative right here, I need to divide by a negative. Okay, so when we divide this, I'm going to put my negative 3 out here. And then I'm going to have negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1, and then I have that x squared still. And then 27 divided by negative 3 is negative 9. Okay, so now since we have that x squared term in the middle, we're going to factor this out a little bit more. I'm going to rewrite what's in the parentheses so you can see what's going on. So we have 1x squared plus 0x minus 9. So since there's no term in the middle, I'm just going to write a 0, so I remember it's a 0. Once you do a couple of these, it'll be easier to see what we're doing, but I'm going to write a 0 there for now, just so we remember there's that 0 in the middle. So when we factored these out, remember we wrote our two sets of parentheses, and then we're going to have a negative 3 out here still. So I'm going to take my a term, which is 1, times our c term, which is negative 9. So 1 times negative 9 is negative 9. And now I need factors of negative 9 that add up to 0. So I'm going to start with 1 and 9, and then 3 and 3. And remember, it's a negative 9. So one of these terms has to be positive, one has to be negative. So let's just make our first terms negative. See what happens. So negative 1 plus a 9 is going to be negative 8. And I want 0 for my middle, remember? So negative 8 is not 0. So I'm going to cross that one out, go to the next one. So negative 3 plus 3 is going to be 0. So I found my two factors. So these are the two numbers that are going to add up to 0. So I'm going to put in, for my first terms, it's going to be 1x and x to add up to 1x squared. And now I need negative 3 plus 3. So I'm going to do my little happy face things down here. And then it doesn't matter where we put either number because in this problem, they're both 1s out front. So I'm just going to put negative 3 here and 3 on the bottom. So 1 times a negative 3 is going to give me negative 3 for the top, and then 1 times plus 3 is going to give me 3 down here. So that's how we're going to factor this one. Let's do another example. Okay, here's our next example. We have 4a squared minus 16. So again, what we're going to do first is look for our GCF. So I'm going to look at my smaller number. My smaller number in this problem is 4. So I'm going to look for my factors of 4. So for 4, we have 1, 2, and 4. So let's start with our biggest factor of 4. We have 4. So 4 goes into 4, 4 goes into 4, and 4 goes into 16. So our GCF for this one is going to be 4. So I'm going to divide each of the terms by 4, divide by your GCF, and then you're going to put your GCF outside. So your GCF always goes out here. So 4a squared divided by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1, then you still have an a squared. Negative 16 divided by 4 is going to be negative 4 for this one. And again, I'm going to write this out so I remember what my a term is. If I had an a in the middle, it needs to be a 0. Since it's not there, I'm just going to write 0. And now from this point, we're going to solve them the way we've been solving problems. We're going to take our a term, which is 1, times our c term, which is negative 4. So 1 times negative 4 is negative 4. And now I need factors of negative 4 that add up to 0. That adds up to our middle term. So for negative 4, I have 1 and 4, 2 and 2, and since it's a negative 4, one has to be negative, one has to be positive. So I'm just going to make my first term negative again. Negative 1 plus 4 is going to be 3, and I want 0, remember, so 3 is not 0, so I'm going to cross that out. And then 2 plus a negative 2 is going to be 0. So these are my two factors. So now when I factor this out, I'm going to have 4 times, I'm going to make my 2 sets of parentheses. It's going to be 1a and 1a, because we need it to multiply to 1a squared, so they both have to be 1a. And then we're going to do this little thing, these little smiley face things. And then it's negative 2 and 2. And again, these two numbers are 1, so it doesn't matter which one is where. Whoops, that's a 2. Negative 2 and 2. So 1 times this outside number needs to multiply to 2, so 1 times 2 is 2. And then 1 times this inside number needs to multiply to negative 2. So that has to be negative 2. So that's how you factor this one. Remember your GCF out here. That's going to be a common mistake. So just remember to, when you take your GCF out up here, you need to put it outside the parentheses at the end. Okay, here's our last problem. We have negative x squared plus 81. So for this one, our GCF, remember if there's no number written out in front of the x squared, it's a 1. So we have negative 1x squared plus 81. So our GCF for this one is negative 1. It's negative 1 because of this leading negative. If there's a leading negative, you're always going to divide by a negative number. And our GCF is just 1. So we're going to divide by a negative 1. So I'm going to take a negative 1 out. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is positive 1. And then we still have that x squared. And then 81 divided by negative 1 is going to be minus 81. Okay, so now I'm going to write this out with our x term, our middle term. So it's going to be 0x in the middle. And then the other two terms are just staying the same. I'm just bringing these down and writing a 0 in the middle, so I remember what's in the middle. So now I'm going to take my a term, which is 1, times my c term, which is negative 81. So 1 times negative 81 is negative 81. And I'm going to write out my factors of 81. So I need factors of 81, this number out here, that add up to 0. So I'm going to start with 1 and 81. 2 doesn't go in 81. Skip to 9 and 9. Okay, so since it's a negative 81, I know one of my factors is positive, one's negative. Let's just make these first terms negative. Let's see what happens. So we have negative 1 plus 81 is going to be 80. And I want 0, so that's not 0. And then I'm going to have negative 9 plus 9 is going to be 0. So I found my two factors. It's negative 9 and 9. So when I factor this, remember to bring your GCF down. Remember to bring the GCF down outside the parentheses. It's part of your answer. It doesn't just disappear. It needs to stay with your answer. So our first terms are always going to multiply to this. It's always going to multiply to, in this case, 1x squared. So I need 1x and 1x for my first two terms. And now my factors are negative 9 and 9. And again, since they're 1s out here, it doesn't matter where we put them. I'm just going to put 9 on the top and then negative 9 down on the other 1. So 1 times this number is going to give me 9, so that has to be 9. And then 1 times the number out here gives me negative 9. So 1 times negative 9 is negative 9. So this was our answer right here, this whole thing. So that's how you factor things with a missing term. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.